Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Join me for a visit to the world-class Chicago Botanical Garden. And if you're looking for ideas for your garden, this is the place to be. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. If you love flowers as much as I do, you'll want to join the millions of visitors that go to Chicago each year. You see, it's a city that's big on green. They really understand the power of the flower. All you have to do is take a walk along the Magnificent Mile, and you won't believe all the floral displays throughout the city. There's beauty at every turn. This is a great place for gardeners. I want to take you on a tour of the Chicago Botanic Garden, where there's so many inspiring features. One of my personal favorites is the English walled garden. And then there's the serenely beautiful Japanese garden called Sansho-En, meaning the Garden of Three Islands. And if you're having difficulty dealing with too much or too little space in your garden, I've got a way you can trick the eye with color. And you know, the winter can be harsh on your plants. So how about taking a look at a way you can use tougher plants to protect the more vulnerable ones? And have I got a recipe for you? Boy, is it delicious. It's Peach Shortcake, guaranteed to make your taste buds do backflips. But first, we'll begin our tour of the Chicago Botanic Garden, starting with that incredible English walled garden. That's all coming up next, so don't go away. The history of gardens in this country has certainly been influenced by gardening trends from Europe, but a recent visit to the Chicago Botanic Garden proves that American garden designers are making their mark on the world gardening community with a style specializing in natural landscapes. You see, they've dedicated a 5-acre garden to a new approach to gardening. It's called the New American Style of Gardening. It's characterized by being informal and relaxed, meadow-like in its planting. It features a wide variety of perennials and ornamental grasses. Just look at this exceptional drift of color set against a background of ornamental grasses. Of course, this new American style of gardening isn't limited just to a palette of native plants. Plants from all over the world are used. You see, it's really more about how the plant feels in the landscape. Certainly the plants have to offer color and texture through the seasons, and movement is also important. Of course, most of us don't have this much space to garden in this style, but you can come to a place like the Chicago Botanic Garden and get wonderful ideas on plant combinations to try in your own garden. The Chicago Botanic Garden is a gardener's dream come true, and the English walled garden, well, it's a perfect example why. It's quite a knockout. John, this garden is so beautiful, it has to be one of the most popular gardens here at the Chicago Botanic Garden.
Well, I think it would be safe to say that it is the most popular garden. People seem to be able to relate to this garden.
Really? And why do you think so?
Well, its small and intimate spaces provide a way for people to interact with it as they would in their own gardens.
And there are a lot of familiar flowers here, I think, to everyone.
There are definitely many familiar flowers.
The element that's quintessentially English is, of course, that border out on the outside of the wall.
Yes, it is. The perennial border, the herbaceous border, whatever you want to call it, it's actually a combination of many different kinds of plants. There's trees, there's shrubs, there's perennials, annuals, vines, all the layers of a garden are there.
Yes, it's really a mixed border, I suppose.
Yeah.
Classic full-stop English, that border. Well, you know, John, over the years I've had an opportunity to spend quite a bit of time in English gardens, and I have to say this one really hits the mark.
Well, that was the assignment of John Brooks, the designer of this garden.
And of course, John's English.
Absolutely.
Well-known English garden designer.
And his challenge was to create a garden that would reflect the many different styles of English gardens that have evolved over the years. The whole garden is a series of walls and rooms that are broken up by different spaces, but throughout you have a sense of that there's something beyond, and it draws one through the garden and into the next space.
Yeah. Now, where are we going here?
Here we're coming into the beginning of the cottage garden, and this is where you'll find one of the more unique features of the garden. The English wall garden as a whole has two major axes, and you're actually standing on one of them right now.
Oh, I see,
and
right.
If you line up with this sundial, it lines up with the urn in the daisy garden, and then through the vista pool in the vista garden, and on to the view beyond.
Now, if we turn this direction, this takes us into the cottage garden.
Yes, we'll move through the rose arbor here, which is kind of the entrance on this side, and you're able to have a little closer inspection of the plants. The plants are completely informally planted, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of all kinds of things, from fruits and vegetables to flowers of all sorts, especially aromatic and fragrant ones, a lot of herbs.
Right. You know, John, for anyone who wants to get involved in gardening, I think the cottage garden is a good style to start with because virtually anything goes.
It's a great style, and that's how people got involved in gardening, and we aren't brought up that way today, that relaxed feel. People feel that they need to do something with some high design, but it's not about that. It's really learning about how to grow something, putting something in the ground, failing and starting over.
Just jump in there and plant. Anything goes.
And right here we're coming upon another one of the axes of the garden, the second axis.
Oh, yes.
There's a bench down here which, if you sit in it, you'll get a perfect view of the fountain down there, which is now obscured by the Cercidophyllum or Katsura tree, the weeping, which is actually another spectacular plant.
It's a beautiful plant.
And the Yew Hedge is another really unique, there's a lot of unique stories about the making of this garden. This hedge was part of an estate here in the vicinity, and the people who owned it wanted to take it down. They knew about the Botanic Garden, and they knew of the English wall garden going in, and they asked us if we would be interested in taking it. So the plants were actually tagged and numbered in order and planted back in the same order, and we had an instant hedge.
What a magnificent gift. Using hedges, creating vistas, and enclosures are design concepts that you commonly see in English gardens. I've incorporated these ideas into my own garden. One of my favorite views is from my front garden, across the fountain and through the arbors leading to my circle garden with the tool shed in the background. And here you can see how I've created an arch in this cypress hedge that leads to a shady path in my side garden. We'll get back to the Chicago Botanic Garden right after the break. Plus, I want to show you ways color can help your garden look and feel larger. So stay with us. Many of us are challenged by how to arrange our gardens in a way that small spaces look larger and large spaces can feel more intimate. One way you can trick the eye is by using color. I think we all have to agree that color can certainly make an impact in the garden. Whether it's beautiful Japanese maple trees such as these or other plants, there's so many wonderful plants to choose from, so why not try a few of each? A simple rule of thumb I follow is to choose plants that either have blooms or foliage in the same color family, and there are lots of different color families. Just take the primary colors. Look at all of the variety just in the color red. And when it comes to blue, it can range from sky blue all the way to purple. And among the yellows, you can go from chartreuse all the way to orange. And then there are flowers that bloom white and the plants that have gray foliage. They're the amiable sort of relatives that get along with every color family. Color can evoke certain moods. Reds and oranges can make you feel hot, while pale blues and lavenders can evoke a restful, cool feeling. The other thing these hot and cool colors seem to do is play with our sense of space. You see, hot reds jump forward and make a space seem smaller, whereas subtle colors like pale blue make a space feel much more expansive. Another thing to consider when putting color combinations together is the individual growing requirements for each plant. And you can get that information off the tags or through the nursery. But when it comes to color, it depends on your own personal taste. Oh yeah, one other thing. Don't forget, green is a color too. Okay, now let's head back to the Chicago Botanic Garden and get the inside scoop on Sansho-En, the Garden of Three Islands. This is a beautiful view of the Japanese garden. Now, this is one of the first gardens built here at the Chicago Botanic Garden.
Yes, it is. And we're fortunate to have had such forward-thinking creators of the garden. They took advantage of the 81 acres of water that we have and created the Japanese garden on 3 islands. The third island that you can see at the end here is a sacred place, and it's not walked on. There's a small ramp that goes underwater so that people can go out and maintain the garden, but It's done with great care, and I believe it's to respect the dead. The shrubs are pruned to look like stones, which are symbols of tranquility, I believe, and the trees are pruned to look older and ancient.
Symbolism plays an important role in designing Japanese gardens.
It does, and you can see that in some of the elements that we have. The bridge, the Zen garden. The Zen garden is a classic part of Japanese landscape design, and that's what Japanese gardens are all about. It's a symbolism of relating nature, and so that when someone sits in a Zen garden and meditates, they're able to enter that space in nature that we feel in our hearts.
I see. So taking those feelings and that experience and distilling it into those simple, pure forms.
Yes. It sounds complicated, but it's really a natural experience, and we do it all the time.
Well, when you walk through that Japanese garden, you certainly sense the tranquility. It really comes through.
It's extremely calming. Just looking out at the view here, and I walk in the morning and walk past this, and it really starts my day in a nice way.
Next, I'll show you how to protect your garden favorites using a little garden strategy, so don't go away. In today's show, we're taking a look at the best Chicago has to offer. You know, I love to visit locations like the Chicago Botanic Garden, where there's so much inspiration, and examples abound in the way of good garden design, gardening techniques, and best of all, some new varieties of plants. As a rose lover, I enjoyed seeing a rose called Nearly Wild. I liked its loose, carefree form and disease resistance. And I also got turned on to the way they use coleus from the Flower Field Stained Glass Works series, particularly this variety called Tilt-A-Whirl. You see, Tilt-A-Whirl is a plant that I grow both in containers and in my flower borders. It mixes and mingles well with other plants, and because it's a sun-loving coleus, its color becomes more intense with more exposure to light. You know, Chicago's known for its harsh winters, so I was curious how the Botanic Garden handles some of its not-so-hardy perennials. You know, we all have plants we want to grow, but just can't because of winter temperatures being so low. I had an opportunity to visit with Galen Gates, the Director of Plant Collections, who told me how the Botanic Garden uses microclimates and how we can do the same in our home gardens. So what is a microclimate?
A microclimate could be defined as the weather conditions in a particular area, usually a small area.
What examples do you have here at the Chicago Botanic Garden?
A great example would be in the English walled garden. And there you will see brick walls that contain a space that not only keep animals such as deer and such out, but can also work to give you these microclimates or these unique little conditions that don't exist anywhere else to grow plants that may be a little bit touchy.
Little protective pockets.
Exactly right.
How can the homeowner establish these microclimates in their own garden?
What you'd like to do is put it on the east side of the home, which will protect it from north and west winds during the winter months. And then you have a little added protection. So how you site it is important, how much exposure to sunlight it receives in the wintertime, and soils, particularly in the Midwest, really play a big role.
In my garden, I've created little pockets that function as microclimates. For instance, the hedge around my fountain garden protects many plants during the winter. And the shade garden is protected by the walls of my house and garage. In the vegetable garden, well, it gets protection from the evergreen border of the boxwoods and the tool shed. Speaking of vegetable gardens, this is the time of year I like to figure out exactly what I'm going to plant in my raised beds. You know, my garden is really tiny, but it's amazing what I can produce in such a limited space. I love to grow salad greens like arugula, spinach, and a wide range of lettuces. My vegetable garden may be small, but you'd be surprised just how much fresh produce these raised beds can deliver. One of the reasons is that I can get such an early start in the spring, thanks to the protection these homemade plastic covers provide. Now, these aren't hothouses. They just slightly raise the soil temperature and keep it more consistent. You see, lettuce actually prefers the cool temperatures of late winter and early spring. In fact, if you've ever tried to grow lettuce in the hot summer, you know it can languish in the heat. I've become fascinated with lettuce. I suppose it's because there's so many different varieties to choose from. I like the subtle differences in their flavor. I want to try them all. In fact, this year, I'm going to plant 8 different varieties. Buttercrunch is one of my all-time favorites, and I also enjoy the more heat-resistant red sale, and another one with reddish leaves called red oak leaf. These can all be grown easily from seed, and they'll germinate in just a few days after covering them with only a dusting of soil and a light spray of water and liquid fertilizer. Every time I plant a crop of lettuce, I always fortify my soil with some homemade compost, and I fertilize with fish emulsion. Now, once the lettuce finishes up by early summer, I'll be ready to plant my tomatoes. After seeing all of those delicious salad greens, you're probably getting a little hungry. I know I am. Well, up next, I have a shortcake recipe that's guaranteed to make your taste buds jump for joy. So don't go away. There's nothing quite like a fresh seasonal dessert to top off a good meal. Cappy Peck Peterson from Trio's Restaurant shares a recipe that's a customer favorite.
We made 24 discs, and for this quantity you'll need 4 cups of flour, 1.5 pounds of very cold unsalted butter cut into small pieces, a half a cup of ice cold water, and a half a teaspoon of salt. We make it in the mixer with a paddle attachment. You don't want to over mix it. It's a little bit like pie crust, maybe a little stickier, and you can't roll it out, it's too fragile. We just pat it out by hand, spray the baking sheet with a little bit of food release, and bake it in a low oven, about 300 degrees, for 20 minutes until it's nice and golden brown.
How am I doing?
That's good, slap it on there. Yeah. After the shortcake is cooled, we layer it with the peaches, some sweetened whipped cream, and some homegrown blueberries.
And garnish it with a beautiful piece of mint.
With a little sprig of fresh mint.
Wonderful.
You know, Alan, when the fresh peaches come in, we sell 1 million of these.
To me, the only thing better than peaches and cream is the addition of Cappy Shortcake. It's a delicious summer treat I look forward to every year. The next time you find yourself in Chicago, I hope you'll take the time to go out to the Botanic Garden. It's a world-class facility. And make sure you try that peach shortcake recipe. It is really delicious. I have lots of other seasonal recipes on my website you may want to try. That's pallensmith.com. Now, as soon as I get these trellises finished, it's out into the garden they go. From the garden, I'm Alan Smith.
In this garden I dream of a bed of flowers. Bluebirds sing of the beauty all around us. And every time the sun comes out, I can't help but smile. Oh, no, I can't help but smile.